most people just don't have their heads wrapped around the fact that when you produce electricity, you have to consume it or it's wasted, right? Like that simple fact. I think if we could educate everybody that that's how electricity works, we'd all be better off for it. But the next step in that is that a lot of times where electricity is generated or when that electricity is generated is either in the wrong place or the wrong time. So you have a geographic or a time issue, too much power that's generated. And most of the power that has the geographic or the time issue is power that's clean. You know, your dam typically is not right next to a city, right? And that means you have excess power in a location that it needs to get transferred. And so that creates some problems. Solar panels or wind, you know, you have power being generated when the wind is blowing. That may not be where the nearby city wants to use it, right? So you've got a disjoint. Those are the issues that Bitcoin mining steps in and solves. And so I see ultimately all of this, like this variability can be smoothed out over time. And that actually is going to lead to lower power costs for everybody and a flourishing of mankind, because lower energy is one of the fundamental inputs to make a society thrive.
Hello guys, welcome once again to BitCorner podcast. Today we're back with English episodes. I know that I have delivered 2 Spanish episodes. I hope that you have liked those. Today we're gonna have at some point a Spanglish. You will understand why. Interesting topic that we're gonna discuss today. This person had been in El Salvador. We're gonna ask him as well how some insights about El Salvador. But as I told you, now we can have deeper conversations, and one of them that have another rabbit hole itself is Bitcoin mining. So that's why today I invited Kent, that he is from Sazmining. So I want to welcome him. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. I'm excited to be on here, and voy tentar hablar un poco en español en este podcast también, porque vivo en Perú. Mi español es de la rúa. Es suficiente, mas no es perfecto.
Excelente. No, vamos a intentarlo. Te haré unas preguntas en español. So, as I told you, and the audience also know, it's going to be quite different this season. I have 3 parts in the podcast. We'll start with the origins, then what's happening now, and then what's your vision for the future. So let's start for the basics. I know that there are some people that are discovering the podcast, and it's natural that's now, you know, Bitcoin, especially with everything happening in El Salvador, but also in the US with Trump, Bitcoin is becoming like really, how we can say that, like really in the media right now. So more people know a bit more about it. So I want to start with your story. So if you can give us like a little context about you, because I know there's a lot of topics to talk about, but just in general, so people can have a little bit of context about your background, if you can share it a bit.
Yeah, I think I came in from a sideways direction to Bitcoin mining, let's say. But I've discovered that my orange pill journey, while kind of similar steps as most other people go through in terms of the thoughts, like my actual physical life journey is a bit unusual. So I mentioned to you at the beginning of the show that I used to live near Cupertino, and that's because the first decade of my career was in rooftop solar. And when I was working in that industry, I was living primarily in the Bay Area. I was competing against, I was managing software and sales and post-acquisition integration for a publicly traded company. And we were competing against Elon's cousins at this time. And there was a change in leadership at my company. And I realized that I didn't align with that leadership. I was also burnt out. And had a dream to see the world. So I said, this is a good time. My piggy bank is full. Let me put on a backpack and go check out the planet. And so I spent a couple of years traveling and fell in love with multiple different areas, but of the globe. But most importantly, I fell in love with a Portuguese woman and Bitcoin. So I wound up in 2016 relocating to Portugal, and at the same time starting a entrepreneurial path in Bitcoin. And it took me about 4 years to find my place in the ecosystem, but I tried my hand at all sorts of different things. Of course, one of the first things, being speculative at first, was to try shitcoin trading. Of course, was not particularly successful and let too many Bitcoins slip through my hands. However, I wasn't my only pursuit. I tried mining from home. I was doing concierge services, so just onboarding people into Bitcoin, trying to get them a bit of Bitcoin. And this was around the Lisbon area. I was also trying out Bitcoin ATMs. I was trying to fund renewable energy projects. But it was when I read Jeff Booth's The Price of Tomorrow in 2020 that I realized, oh, yeah, wonderful book and wonderful human being Jeff is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading that I realized, I actually belong in mining because of my energy background, solar energy background. So I found the founder of Sazmining early 2021 and asked if he needed a hand and helped him to raise some money. And we've now used that capital to build Sazmining. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later in the podcast.
Absolutely. One thing that I also want to ask you, because I'm just thinking how to start this rabbit hole, and I think it's good if we start with the basics. Like, for example, for those who heard of mining but don't quite get it, what is Bitcoin mining in the simplest term that you can explain?
The simplest way I can think about it is, or to explain it, is to compare it to a lottery. Most people are understand sort of lottery terminology or gambling terminology, right? You've got odds, right? When you roll the dice or make a gamble, and that's sort of like Bitcoin mining, right? Basically, every 10 minutes, the way the protocol works, right? Because the Bitcoin network itself is what generates all the new Bitcoin. So as a miner, you're incentivized to mine by the protocol. And the protocol gives you a reward every 10 minutes. Not everybody a reward. It gives the miner that generates the next block in the blockchain a reward every 10 minutes. And that reward consists of two parts, right? It consists of the block reward, which is currently 3.125 Bitcoin, or at $80,000, you can say $250,000 worth of value. The other is transaction fees. Transaction fees, as of late, are about 2% of the block reward, right? So it's not very much right now. But those two things together, they go to a miner that generates the successful next block. Okay, how do you generate the next block? Because the blockchain is just one block to the next, right? It just keeps adding on every 10 minutes, right? You guys, your audience probably understands that. So you generate the next block by playing a lottery, basically. You make guesses over and over again by computing all the transactions that are in a block. So you put together a block, it's called the block template, and then you run a calculation on that. A hashing calculation is what it's called. Mm-hmm. But you need your hashing calculation to produce a specific result to win and create the next block. So the only way to do that calculation, though, is to guess. There's no other way. And so if you look at it, you basically need to try as fast as possible, which is what every other miner is trying to do, by the way, to try as fast as possible. So you can statistically look at it as similar odds to just playing a lottery. Everybody's just rolling the dice as fast as they can, hoping that when they roll the dice and do that calculation that they get the answer, because the answer is actually already known. They already have to get that answer. And as the network produces blocks. If the blocks are created too fast, the network says, okay, we're going to make it more difficult to guess what the block is. And if the blocks are coming too slowly, then the network says, okay, we're going to make it easier to play this lottery that we call mining. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the simplest analogy I've been able to come up with.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And now I want to ask you why mining is essential to the Bitcoin security, especially to the decentralization of it.
Yeah, so mining is the connection to reality with Bitcoin. If mining didn't exist, Bitcoin would not be money, just full stop. And you can actually see this right now if you go check out Ethereum, because if you price Ethereum in Bitcoin terms, Ethereum actually was proof of work at one point, and they moved away from that. They went to proof of stake. So they removed the mining component. They removed the work. And when they did, you can see it's just been, that was like 2 years ago now, it's only been down, the pricing. So it's just totally losing its value. So why is proof of work so important? Well, proof of work is how we use energy that we harness and give something value. So it's where the scarcity comes from. But more fundamental, I'm being a little too abstract right now. If we want to be very concrete about what it does for the network, what it does for the network is produce the next blocks in the blockchain. And stacking these blocks on top of each other is what cements the blockchain and makes it an immutable source of truth for ourselves. So mining, that's function one, is to craft the blocks in the blockchain. Function two is also to be in charge of issuing the monetary supply. And what I mean by that is Satoshi, when he designed the network and started it, he designed the monetary policy to be an immutable function of the Bitcoin blockchain from day one. So for the first 4 years, 50 Bitcoin were generated for each block. That was the reward from the protocol, not including transaction fees. Then after 4 years, it went to 25. Then it went to 12.5. Then it went to 6.25. And now it's at the fifth epoch. We are now at 3.125 as the block reward, and so again, just to answer your question, the two functions that mining serves are one, to generate blocks, which help to secure and cement the blockchain, and two is to issue new Bitcoin into the ecosystem. And to put some further numbers on that, we're at about 20 million of 21 million Bitcoin that has been issued at this point. So we have another, 115 years, I believe, before the remaining 1 million Bitcoin will be issued. But that's what mining does.
So we're still early.
What's that? Yeah, we're still early. So early.
You said that you read Price of Tomorrow of Jeff Booth, and that's a great book. Actually, Jeff had been in the podcast. I read the book as well, and I want to ask you, when was your aha moment? I mean, when do you understand the value of Bitcoin? And I'm not talking about the monetary value, right? I mean everything that is behind it.
Yeah, I think the value proposition, there's been a series of aha moments. I don't think that there's like one specific moment. But I discovered Bitcoin for the first time. Like, I remember hearing about it when I lived in the Bay Area circa 2011, 2012, but didn't explore it. I just didn't think anything of it. I was quite busy with a different career, and it was just not something I had any interest in. But in 2015, I had time. It was kind of towards the end of my walkabout, the 2-year walkabout I took. And I'd rented a house with some other travelers, and we were actually in Peru in the Sacred Valley. And because I had time, I was just kind of scratching my curiosity, looking at different things, and I discovered Bitcoin. And I couldn't quite get my head around it because there's some areas that are just, I didn't know. I'm an engineer by training, but I didn't understand a lot of finance and financial terms, and could understand it. But I could tell that there was something there to it, and so I just kept trying to read and understand it. And I would say some of the more important aha moments along the way were the Bitcoin standard definitely had a big impact. I think The Sovereign Individual was another book that had a massive impact on me because it predicted Bitcoin in essence. It was a book written in the 90s. And then the Sailor series as well. I think a lot of people, it's hard to overstate the impact that had when it was released. It was, Robert Breedlove's first serious content that he put out there, and it was just powerful. It felt like listening to the Sailor series, if you've never done it, is worthwhile, because it's like Sailor when he first sort of unleashes his passion on the world for Bitcoin. Robert Breedlove sits down and asks him a question at the beginning of every podcast, and then Michael Saylor just expounds on it for an hour and a half, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating thing to reach. So anyway, those would be, I think, the pieces of content that had the biggest impact on me. But what I would say why I saw value in it initially was I've been traveling so much and always getting money whatever country I was in. There's always some challenges or hurdles or something that I had to sort of figure out locally. And so I realized as soon as I used Bitcoin for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, I can send this and do this all outside of the banking system. That's valuable. Just not to have to deal with banks. So it's oh, what a relief. So that's what stuck with me, that use case.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's I think the most valuable thing that not just happening in El Salvador, but one of the main issues that solved, right? That people didn't have a bank account, and now you can have bank services without a bank. So now, and you can have sound money in your pocket. So that's even more powerful. But yeah, we're gonna discuss about El Salvador a bit later. So then you started your career in Sazmining. I want to ask you two things about that. Why exactly Sazmining? How you discovered it, because you joined there, and then what problems are you trying to solve in Sazmining?
Yeah. So I joined Sazmining because I liked the founder. Is basically it. I joined as an advisor and helped to raise some capital. And I like to describe the time period before we raised the capital and set out. It was pre-seed capital that we wound up raising. And I think of the time period before that pre-seed capital came in as kind of Sazmining's wander through the wilderness, trying to find itself. But once we had that pre-seed capital and made the pivot to what we've now built, we were kind of Sazmining 1.0 versus 2.0. Now the problem that we're trying to solve actually is a bit philosophical in nature, and driven by a monetary incentive. And if that sounds anything like Bitcoin's adoption generally, I would say that that's true. And the problem that we're trying to solve is that the Bitcoin mining sector is dominated by people that are looking to acquire fiat, not Bitcoin. And that's just fundamentally true. And you can know this is true because most people don't know anybody that's in the mining community, right? It's like a separate part of the Bitcoin ecosystem for most. And what I realized is that I had an experience trying to mine from home in Portugal, and I was just like, this is bollocks. I just want to be able to have a typical Web 2.0 experience. I want to go online I want to own a mining rig in a place that's got low cost electricity, and I want the rewards from that mining rig to go right to my wallet. Like, why doesn't that exist? It seems so obvious that people would want that. Kind of Bitcoin mining that your mother could do, so to speak. And so that's what we set out to build. And it turns out that is, although that idea sounds very simple, it's very non-obvious to most of the rest of the market, I've discovered. And the miners or the clients have absolutely loved it. And investors have struggled to get their head wrapped around why clients would love it. So there's been an interesting dichotomy between those two groups. But what we've built, in essence, is mining as a service. And so through kind of your typical e-commerce platform, you can purchase a mining rig from us. And right now we're offering mining rigs in Norway and Paraguay. So we go build the relationship, find the data center, find low cost power, find the operator, do all that heavy lifting. That's the hard part of Bitcoin mining. And that way you as an end consumer can simply buy the piece of hardware and from us, and we get it shipped and deployed, and then the Bitcoin rewards go to your wallet. And so the way that business works is it can only be done in a high trust way, because ultimately we recognize that we have possession of something our clients own, which is their hardware, but we have to manage it. So it's a high trust relationship, and we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out like how to design for that experience in such a way that we can empower clients. But ultimately, we never touch their Bitcoin, and how we make money as a business is not by selling hardware or electricity. How we make money as a business is by aligning with our clients, so that when the mining pool pays out the rewards, we instruct the mining pool to broadcast that transaction into two places. So split the transaction, and so that 15% goes to our wallet and 85% goes to our client's wallet. So that's the only way we make money, is through splitting the pool payout for a management fee. And that also means that if our clients aren't generating Bitcoin, then we're not generating revenue for the business either. So, we kind of put ourselves into a position where structurally we have to do the right things for our clients to enable and empower that high trust relationship.
Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoin, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoin en custodia de terceros como los exchanges puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al Internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, BitCorner Podcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría. Yeah, I want to go a bit deeper on that. So you're 100% renewable and non-custodial, right? As you
Yeah,
describe it right now.
yeah, that's correct.
Why was important to design like the company like that? I'm just thinking because there are a lot of companies that will emerge as well, uh, and other companies that are going to El Salvador. So probably, I think it's really important to differentiate between that, right? Like, why it's important to be non-custodial, especially in this kind of model. Let's say that how we take care about our money, especially with Bitcoin.
Yeah. So what I really like about our business model is that to participate, a client has to give us a Bitcoin address. That's the address where the rewards are going to go. So structurally, I cannot custody your Bitcoin. And we set ourselves up that way because we never wanted to ever have any ownership, because as a business, forget me being here at some point, 30, 40 years down the road, let's say, like, I'm not here, somebody else is. Well, structurally, we've put the seeds in place that it's very difficult as a business for us to ever figure out a way to touch that Bitcoin if all I'm getting is a Bitcoin address, right? So you don't have the problem like if you send somebody to an exchange, you now have the problem that your buddy just bought Bitcoin for the first time, and at what point is he or she actually going to get the Bitcoin off the exchange? It's like from the very beginning, if you're mining Bitcoin, you're going to have to put that in a location. Now, you might point it to an exchange because you don't feel comfortable yourself, but that's at least your choice. So it's from a structural way, like at least avoiding that issue of people getting stuck custodying their Bitcoin on an exchange. So yeah, that very, very important for us to have that. And then you asked, what was the second thing you asked that was really important?
That it was 100. Why it was 100% renewable and non-custodial. That why was important to design the company in this model.
So renewable was important for me personally. I've built a career in clean energy. I very much believe in that from an application specific standpoint. And what I mean is rooftop solar is a sector I worked in, and I still very fundamentally believe in that. And I don't necessarily agree with all the big industrial land installations that take acres and acres of land to install solar panels. So some slight nuance there. But so from a personal standpoint, very much believe in clean energy and its impact and its application for humanity. But more importantly than that, I also knew that by focusing on clean energy to power the mining rigs, that we would be able to position ourselves well to withstand any of the attacks that were coming against Bitcoin mining's energy use. Because if you can go to market and say, hey, look, all your energy is coming from a clean source, well, you certainly can't be torn down by all the moralizing that's out there. Our brand promise, we're 100% clean power right now, so carbon-free power sources. And our brand promise is to be 20% better than the network, which is the network is currently about 57% carbon-free power.
Wow, that's super awesome. And I also want to ask you about well, you mentioned that about Paraguay and also about Norway. I read the article about that. Super nice. I'm gonna ask you questions about that. But first, how does Bitcoin help turn surplus hydro into real economic value through the mining?
Yeah. So I think this is one of the things I really love about Bitcoin is it forces you to learn about areas of how society works that you may not have cared about before, right? Like I never really cared about money until I discovered Bitcoin, and then I suddenly realized, oh, I need to understand money to understand Bitcoin, and now it's like I'm empowered with all this extra knowledge. Well, the same thing happens with mining and energy, right? Is you sort of forced to understand how energy works if you're getting into mining. And one of the things that most people truly do not understand about energy is you use it or lose it. when it comes to electricity. Like it's most everything in our life we can save a bit of and kind of be economical about our behavior. Like, hey, cool, like you took a chunk of cheese off the block of cheese. Well, you can wrap it up and save the rest in the fridge, right? That doesn't work with electricity. When it's produced, it has to be consumed. And if it's not consumed, then it's got to go to ground. That's just how electricity works, right? It's a flow, it's a force. And as a result, the place and the time that electricity is being generated does not always match with where the electricity consumers are, and as a result you get a mismatch, and that mismatch is what allows is an opportunity for Bitcoin mining, because in essence when there's a mismatch, that means too much power is on the grid, or not enough power is on the grid. And anytime there's too much power on the grid, that excess power can be turned into Bitcoin through Bitcoin mining. So in the case of Paraguay is an easy example to talk about. There is a massive mine there called the Itapu Dam, and it crosses the Paraguay-Brazil border. It's a fantastic marvel of mankind that was even built. But in essence, it's a 14 gigawatt dam. 7 gigawatts go to Paraguay, 7 go to Brazil, and Paraguay can only consume at this point about 4 megawatts of it. So they've got gigawatts. So they've got 3 extra gigawatts, or 3,000 megawatts of excess power. Now they wind up selling it at a loss, or historically that's what they've done, to Brazil. Mm-hmm. But Bitcoin miners have showed up there and said, hey, why don't we just pay you a better rate than Brazil is, and then the revenue goes here and uplifts the economy. And so the Paraguayan government has been quite happy with that arrangement, because now not only does mining create jobs, but that revenue that would otherwise be going to Brazil is now going to Paraguay and uplifting the GDP of Paraguay. The third thing that is occurring there that's incredible is that miners are having to build out the electrical infrastructure. So there is there's a grid that I would say is underdeveloped that is running all this electricity, but to actually access it, you've got to build things like substations. And if what happens, what transpires is what I suspect, that infrastructure will be around long after Bitcoin miners are gone. And so now you suddenly have infrastructure that miners developed that can power local industry to grow, this society and civilization in Paraguay.
And I want to ask you from the other side, what about Brazil? Do you test the water there, or they try to do the same thing or not? Or the cost of electricity is way different there?
So not tried the water there. A lot of our business model comes down to finding a data center operator that we can rely on, and we haven't discovered that particular candidate at this moment. That said, we are interested in considering it. And from our standpoint as a business, we have got a portion of our revenue coming from the US, a portion coming from Paraguay, and a portion coming from Norway. I would like to balance where we are jurisdictionally. It's intentional that we're in 3 different jurisdictions. And I would like to grow into more, because the more diversity we have in jurisdictions, the more we can avoid things like the tariffs that are just now happening, right? Actually, it was quite amusing on X, because somebody posted like, oh, you mean Sazmining is going to win here because of these tariffs? Because I'm surprised somebody's recognizing that our geographical diversity is allowing us to sort of avoid the problem. Like, right now is not the time to go build and scale in the US with all the volatility there, right? It's just like, okay, we're focusing on Paraguay and Norway while this is going on. And then, I assume things will smooth out and it's going to all work out in the US, but we'll wait until there's a little more clarity before trying to grow more in the US.
But that's cool because this is, I think, I have talked about the the flag theory, like, but in theory, but your company is actually one applying it, so that's cool to have a real world example of it.
Yeah, so I didn't mention in my personal story, but a couple of years ago, my wife, so we lived in Portugal until a couple of years ago, and my wife, her work brought us to Peru. And so here I'm personally living this life where, because of who my wife is, I wound up moving to Portugal, not because I intended, I use like, hey, I got to get out of the US or anything, but I've now been outside the US about a decade, right? And I've lived this life where I've gone from the US to Portugal and now to Peru. And yeah, there's a lot of different work and movement, got a family, and there's a lot of dynamics and all that, but I've lived and I've seen like, okay, what it's like to sort of live in different jurisdictions, and it sort of makes you, there's not a lot of people that understand this, but you sort of like start looking at bound borders as like, these are silly. And so I kind of applied that same thinking to Sazmining, and I was just like, okay, like, if I, as a U.S. citizen with a Portuguese citizenship and a Peruvian passport, like, there's not too many places in the world I can't just show up and be fine with the variety of passports and residencies. So I was thinking the same idea could be applied to Sazmining. It just seemed obvious, but yeah, it's I didn't know it would actually become important, but like right now it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also mentioned that you launched the facility, right, in the Arctic Circle in Norway. So
yeah.
I want to ask you about that. That I think that what you do is to reuse the heat for building warm, I think. First, why there, and then if you can explain us like how the system actually work. Are we talking about thermal efficiency, circularity, or something bigger? I don't know.
Yeah, so how that works is, this is the solution there, I wouldn't say is scalable. It's a really application-specific data center. Mm-hmm. So what we've got there is a large building, and it was originally a hospital, and it's being renovated. About a third of it is in use right now and has been renovated as a business center to house multiple different businesses, right? And so the way the hospital worked was there was a massive oil boiler in the basement, and they would keep it supplied with oil, and then there was a closed loop liquid that was circulated around the hospital that heated the entire hospital and now business center, right? And so what's occurred is they wanted to move and be, this big movement of power sources. So there's a big push to be carbon neutral in Norway. And so as part of that, using all the oil in this business center, they wanted to find a solution. And so they, somehow our data center operators discovered this opportunity, and they offered, hey, we can mine Bitcoin here, or we can build you a data center and reduce your heat costs, basically was the pitch. And so, sure, okay, we buy the heat from you, and it's cheaper than the heat costs that we'll currently have. And so it's a win for them. And for our data center operator and us through to our clients, what that means is, in essence, that heat revenue that comes from heating the building reduces the electricity expense. So you wind up with a lower electricity bill. And that's all included in the pricing that we offer to our clients. It's just a fixed rate, but it's an extremely low rate, 4.6 cents there in Norway, as a result of the heat reuse. And so the way it works is they are hydro-cooled Bitcoin miners. That means that the miners have cool water come into them and hot water come out. There's little tubes in each of the miners, and those tubes take the water right across the ASICs. So the water is directly cooling those ASIC chips, and then it's hot water by the time it comes out, and it circulates through a loop through kind of a radiator system, and that radiator system it extracts the heat into the second loop, that goes throughout the business center, and so the heat then gets transferred to that other loop, and it transfers throughout the heating center. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces, and it's quite a sophisticated design. It's I think the fourth iteration of this technology from our data center operators, so it's getting fairly advanced. But we had Whatsminer visit the site because it's an exemplary site, and they walked away saying it was one of the cleanest, most impressive installations that they'd ever seen.
That's cool. Yeah, actually, I was looking a few years ago. I think during COVID. I don't know if you've seen this. That what is the name of this guy? Zac Efron. He made like a documentary, and one of the documentary, like I think it's called Down to Earth, and he went to Norway.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those episodes. Yeah.
So there was, I don't know if you watched one that it was about Norway and how they use like also they do like geothermal something to use that energy to heat also the houses like that. So it resonated to me a little about that, what you guys are doing, because I don't know. I think there are similar approach. Of course, they're doing it in another way, right? Here is to use the energy to mine Bitcoin and to reuse it and to make something valuable behind it.
Well, I haven't seen that specific episode. And it sounds like I probably stopped watching it before I got to the good stuff. But I think what you're describing, I think, is what's called district heating. And it's a really unique idea. I just discovered 2 years ago myself. I really didn't know anything about it. But in the Scandinavian countries, so Sweden, Finland, and Norway, there's many communities where heat is a utility that is shared in the same way that water, sewer, electricity is shared. It's a network, right? And so there's a heat piping system that goes through all the buildings and homes, and you have a heating bill that's paid, and the energy source for that varies. And a lot of these countries, because they have this distributed heating system, are looking for ways to reduce the carbon footprint, and Bitcoin mining coming in has been able to do that, because in essence, you create your data center where you're going to mine Bitcoin, and you just shuttle all the heat in and stick it into that heating system. And now suddenly they need less energy from another heating source to supply the heat into the heating district. And so, yeah, there's been a fantastical fit there. And it's been really cool to see that growing and blossoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I want to ask you about El Salvador and another question about mining. But time flies, so I think now.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I think now is the proper time to make you the question. That I have this trivia game. So my previous guests have a question for you, and you will have the opportunity to make the question for my next guest. At the end of the episode, I'll tell you who it is, and you can make the question. So I'm gonna share really quick my screen so you can see.
What was the interaction that you would say that recently actually changed your view on Bitcoin? So what I'm asking is basically, having a couple of years probably in Bitcoin, or maybe less or more, or months, you probably thought you understood Bitcoin, what it is. Did you have an interaction with a person, with someone that you told about Bitcoin or anything, that actually changed your view on Bitcoin, what it is, what it defines? So tell us about this interaction.
I love this kind of questions.
I do too. It's a fun one. That's a really make you think, especially because I've been in Bitcoin for about 10 years now, and what I'm discovering is, like the network, it seems to be getting slower to change. My opinions on it are also becoming slower to change. Like I remember in the beginning, like there was kind of this Cambrian explosion of aha moments, and now it seems like those are fewer and farther between. But they still happen. It's not like they've ended. It's just a little slower to occur. I think the last one I had of those was actually some work by Bob Burnett, who's an advisor to Sazmining. So he's the CEO of Barefoot Mining and also the former CTO of Gateway Computers, which helped develop, the personal computation device and led like kind of the Web 1.0 movement. He changed my mind about block space and how scarce it will be. Like I've heard, block space is a marketplace for Bitcoin, just like, on the exchange, you can see the marketplace for fiat against Bitcoin, right? Like what that price is going to be. In the same way, the block space itself is a marketplace that people are going to bid for with transaction fees, right? And he made me see how mining, Bitcoin mining was going to likely become, and quite, I'm still wrapping my head around it, but I agree with his thesis that because of the scarcity of transactions that can fit, even optimized to the absolute end, the base layer Bitcoin blockchain, the number of settlements that can occur there is limited enough that as Bitcoin gets adopted into the financial system, banks will need to be miners in order to control block space to ensure their transactions can get in. And that was an aha moment for me about how Bitcoin is going to be used. I mean, if you strip it all away, Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger. And if all the banks are going to use that decentralized ledger as their source of truth for their record keeping, there's just not enough transaction space available on that ledger each year. And so it is going to lead to that outcome, assuming that we are correct that Bitcoin embeds itself further and further into the banking system. So that really was one thing recently that shifted my mind about Bitcoin.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it. I'm gonna make a research about it because I think it's another rabbit hole to explore.
It is. There's so many. It just keeps opening further and further.
Absolutely. All right. ¿Qué tal tu experiencia en El Salvador? ¿Fuiste a Adopting Bitcoin? No sé cuántas veces has estado en El Salvador, pero si nos puedes contar tu experiencia personal ahí.
Tengo mucha experiencia en El Salvador. Había 3 veces en El Salvador.
3 veces.
2001, 2013, la última año. So because I've gone over, 24 years now to El Salvador, I've very much seen it evolve.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so it's been. I think I've got. I know there's other people that have had that type of an experience, but it's been a unique experience, I think, amongst Bitcoiners to have that. So why I went to El Salvador in 2001 is I'm a surfer, and there's
so you went to
waves in El Salvador. I went to Punta Roca in 2001.
Okay.
I took a quarter off from my college, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, to go to Costa Rica for 3 months, just to surf. I wanted to have that experience. And I had a couple buddies. We went and we realized that there's a great swell coming in, a great southerly swell. And so we hopped on a bus, took a 2-day road trip up to La Libertad and stayed there. And the country was an absolute mess. I literally saw somebody get stabbed. I had never seen so much alcohol being consumed, or so many like missing limbs. I mean, it was wild, and no young men. I mean, we had a safe place to stay, thankfully, and we traveled with quite a bouncer type of personality that was nobody would want to mess with. So we felt totally safe, and genuinely to this day, that was some of the best surf I've ever caught in my life. But in my head, I was like, I don't think I'll come back to El Salvador anytime soon. And then 2013, I had the opportunity to join a friend from Santa Cruz, California, and he had a connection in El Salvador, and we knew the country was a lot safer at this particular point, and so it was like a prearranged like surf trip. So we went down there for a week, and it was in why is the name of it?
2013, you said. I think Bukele was
2000.
the mayor back then. The mayor of San Salvador, I think.
It's what's now Bitcoin Beach, and so we literally were there surfing before
El Zonte.
El Zonte, yes, thank you. We were surfing El Zonte, and so it was pretty special for me then. Wonderful trip. Got great waves. Felt much safer at this point. No longer felt like the revolution or wartime vibes going on. We knew it wasn't totally safe because of MI13 influence, but it wasn't also as extreme as I think it got right before Bukele cleaned things up. And then last year I got to go and I stayed a couple days in El Zonte, and completely different town. I mean, I recognized the layout of it, but felt very secure, felt very safe. San Salvador felt, like a completely different place, and also felt very safe. And so, yeah, I've been very impressed with the changes in El Salvador. I have a lot of respect for what Naib's done. And I am curious as well. I think there's an open question mark for myself and many others about what El Salvador's future looks like, right? I think it's very, I think when you have as much power as a man like Naib has at this point, I think it's very seductive. It's like the Ring in Gollum, right? And so I think as much power as he has, I hope that he figures out a good succession plan for his future and figures out how to empower his citizens now that he's secured the country and made it a safer place and is building the economy. But that's the only part that worries me is if he becomes more like Gollum, or if he goes the direction of Frodo and throws the ring into the fire.
Great analogy. I love it. Yeah. Ken, we're gonna wrap it up. Time flies.
Sure.
I had a list of questions to still ask you, but hopefully I can have you in the podcast in the future.
Well, let me apologize for being long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. Actually, I love this kind of episodes when we have a lot of context on. So, but I think I'm gonna wrap it up with this question: that do you think that could mining actually accelerate like renewable energy infrastructure instead of competing with it? Yeah.
Do I think mining will accelerate renewable energy adoption? Is that what you're
the energy infrastructure? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
like Bitcoin
100%. Mining. Yeah, I mean, here's the fundamental thing that I think gets missed a lot is just about where energy generation occurs and when it occurs, right? So again, going back to something I said earlier, right? Most people just don't have their heads wrapped around the fact that when you produce electricity, you have to consume it or it's wasted, right? Like that simple fact. I think if we could educate everybody that that's how electricity works, we'd all be better off for it. But the next step in that is that a lot of times where electricity is generated or when that electricity is generated is either in the wrong place or the wrong time. So you have a geographic or a time issue, too much power that's generated. And most of the power that has the geographic or the time issue is power that's clean. Your dam typically is not right next to a city, right? And that means you have excess power in a location that it needs to get transferred. And so that creates some problems. Solar panels or wind, you have power being generated when the wind is blowing. That may not be where the nearby city wants to use it, right? So you've got a disjoint. Those are the issues that Bitcoin mining steps in and solves. And so I see ultimately all of this, like this variability can be smoothed out over time. And that actually is going to lead to lower power costs for everybody and a flourishing of mankind, because lower energy is one of the fundamental inputs to make a society thrive.
Absolutely. Ken, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I hope again to have you in a second part to discuss more things. I love what you do. I love your company. I think it's a great model how you guys do the thing. Especially, I love the part that it's non-custodial, and as you said, there's a deep rabbit hole just in mining and energy. And little by little, we're learning about it in the podcast. So thank you for your time and explaining all these kind of things here.
Well, we need more. We need more Bitcoiners to get into mining. So yes, thank you for the opportunity, Juan. We fundamentally need that because decentralized ownership is healthier for the network, and I really appreciate getting to speak to an audience of El Salvadorian and Spanish and Americans that it sounds like you've got, because I very much love living in Latin America, and would love to see the Bitcoin community thrive and blossom here. So again, thank you, Juan. I appreciate it.
Thanks to you. And guys, see you next week. We'll continue with more content. Next week will be a little bit different. You'll find out who's my next guest. But yeah, for now, that's it. See ya.